Iran attempted to prevent attacks from the United States and Israel by threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz and attack ships passing through the region. However, the presence of large American aircraft carriers rendered this strategy ineffective. The United States counterattack resulted in the massive destruction of the Iranian Navy, with approximately 95% of its operational capacity neutralized. Following the bombings of ports and ships, the surviving Iranian vessels were left without safe haven even in their own territorial waters. Desperate, dozens of vessels, including corvettes and warships, attempted to flee to the open ocean in search of shelter in distant countries. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Among them were the ships Iris Dina, Iris Levant, and Iris Boucher, which were returning from the Milan 2026 naval exercise in India. Monitored by the United States Navy from the beginning, these ships sailed through the Indian Ocean attempting to escape. The most emblematic case was that of the Iris Dina, which accelerated southward from Sri Lanka upon noticing American surveillance, but was ultimately hit before it could return to Iran. The ship was torpedoed by a United States submarine on March 4, 2026. This was the first torpedo attack of this type since World War II. Another ship attempting to escape the United States Navy, the Iris Levant, was following a similar route. The vessel was heading towards the southern coast of India, but changed course, citing a technical failure. The landing ship Iris Levant barely managed to reach the port of Kochi, India. Its 183 crew members were forcibly housed in nearby naval facilities. The Iris Boucher, which was following behind the Iris Levant trying to escape the intense attacks, suffered the same fate. This fleet resupply ship sought refuge in the port of Colombo, Sri Lanka, but was eventually intercepted. Neither vessel managed to complete its escape plans. Do you think these dramatic capture moments interrupted the Iranian ship's escape operations? Surprisingly, no. The vessels continued to change course due to the United States attacks. Most ships fled Bandar Abbas and Chabahar, heading towards the Indian Ocean or the waters near Pakistan. However, the United States struck more than 60 vessels. Faced with this shocking number of losses, the Iranian Navy realized it was completely trapped in the Indian Ocean. After these heavy losses, the remaining ships resorted to hiding in ports or fleeing in small boats. Some ships attempted to blend in with the so-called shadow fleet, the so-called ghost fleet that allegedly transports Iranian oil to China clandestinely. These vessels headed towards Pakistan or Oman, but the result remained the same. Dozens of ships were neutralized before reaching their intended destinations. This escape story became the clearest proof yet of how the Iranian Navy's prestige had vanished from the world stage. A power that had defied the world by closing its own strait disappeared in a matter of days. The pursuit of these vessels by the United States in the open ocean, however, sent an extremely clear message about the global balance of power. Washington was proclaiming that control of the oceans was entirely in its hands. It became clear that no hiding place would be left for any hostile element. Thus, Iran's dream of conducting operations beyond its seas was buried forever in the depths. Plans to reach their allies by sea have come to a complete end. So, what was the reason behind the massive U.S. operations that led the Iranian Navy to flee its own waters and venture into the ocean? To understand this, it is first necessary to observe the ruthless measures taken by the Tehran regime after the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. In this strategic strait, a narrow maritime corridor of only 33 kilometers through which approximately 20 million barrels of oil pass daily, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps adopted an extremely aggressive stance. Iran mercilessly attacked 17 different commercial oil tankers attempting to cross the strait. As a result of these attacks, 6 gigantic tankers were rendered unusable. In other words, Tehran had directed its retaliatory measures against completely the wrong targets. The civilian oil tanker Mayuri the Nari, sailing under the Thai flag, became the target of Iranian drones while attempting to cross the strait. Massive damage appeared on the stern of the vessel, just above the waterline, after the crew was evacuated. These damage patterns were the typical signature of unmanned surface vehicles loaded with explosives, so-called kamikaze boats. Even a Russian liquefied natural gas carrier fell into this asymmetrical ring of fire. These burning steel giants in the middle of the sea represented a huge blow to global energy security. The Iranian regime made no distinction in causing this chaos. Attacks were being carried out even against ships belonging to Moscow, considered Tehran's closest ally. The regime was following a completely ruthless strategy in taking this step. Mojtaba Khamenei made his first public statement on March 13th via state television. In that message, he made the regime's objectives clear to the entire world. Khamenei announced that the strait would be used as a tool of pressure against the enemy. He declared unambiguously that this strategic passage would be closed. The statements by Ali Reza Tangsiri, commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, were even more direct and aggressive. Tangsiri stated that ships from the United States, Israel, and European countries would not be allowed to cross the strait. He issued a clear and unacceptable ultimatum saying, "If you have any doubts, come and test us." Iran's plan was to trigger a shock in the global energy market by threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, raising the price of oil above $100 a barrel, and pressuring Western economies with inflation and an energy crisis. Iranian forces in the strait rely not primarily on large warships, but on asymmetric weapons hidden in mountains and tunnels. These include anti-ship ballistic missiles such as Qam-2 and Khalij, Fars submarines capable of engaging ships at high speed, as well as Shahed 136 kamikaze drones, are also available. Small, fast attack boats can also operate in the shallow waters of the region. Iran still relies on indirect support from the Houthis in Yemen, who threaten routes in the Red Sea with missiles of Iranian technology. With these combined threats, traffic in the Strait of Hormuz has been drastically reduced. Dozens of ships have stopped crossing the region, and more than 1,000 commercial vessels have begun waiting outside the Gulf to avoid attacks. With the start of operations, that number plummeted to almost zero overnight. More than 1,000 oil tankers and commercial vessels formed a gigantic queue off the Gulf Coast. They remained anchored with no alternative, waiting for a safe passage corridor to open. Risk premiums for ships transiting the region skyrocketed to astronomical levels. Still, there were some notable exceptions that managed to navigate this deadly ring of fire. In particular, ships linked to China adopted a completely different strategy in this chaotic environment. The deep economic ties between Beijing and Tehran were altering the dynamics of the situation. These relations afforded Chinese ships a kind of unofficial immunity in the strait. Large cargo ships like the Iron Maiden and the Sino-Ocean made a rather clever move. Using automated identification systems, they openly declared to the world that they were Chinese ships. This digital shield they established prevented them from becoming targets of uncontrolled missiles. Thus, they ensured that millions of barrels of oil arrived safely in China. On the other hand, Pakistan, which urgently needed to meet its energy needs, created its own solution. The Pakistani Navy launched a new mission called Operation Muhafizul Bahar. They began providing armed escort for their own civilian oil tankers. Even so, they avoided entering directly into the narrow and dangerous waters of the Strait of Hormuz. For now, they have limited their operations to the Arabian Sea. The Turkish Minister of Transport and Infrastructure also made a rather important statement on the matter. He announced to the world that 15 Turkish-owned ships were waiting in the strait to make the crossing. One of these ships, the Rosanna, was the protagonist of a remarkable success story. As a result of sensitive and secret diplomatic negotiations, it managed to cross the region safely. Thus, it became one of the rare vessels to escape that ring of fire. However, the other 14 Turkish ships continued to wait anxiously in the area. These exceptional passages conveyed a very important message. They demonstrated that the Strait of Hormuz was not completely closed. However, they also proved that crossing was only possible through specific power balances and diplomatic negotiations. As if the pressure Iran exerted on international oil and cargo ships wasn't enough, the country also took steps to transform its maritime areas into something akin to a minefield. Mining in the Strait of Hormuz and its surrounding areas carried the potential to trigger a global crisis. However, the American side acted in response to this threat and managed to thwart the Iranian strategy of transforming the strait into a high-risk zone through critical maneuvers. A total of 16 vessels specialized in laying naval mines were identified and destroyed one by one. The strategic importance of this U.S. military action was enormous. Had these ships succeeded in completing their secret missions, disaster would have been inevitable. The Strait of Hormuz would have become a gigantic trap, impossible to clear for years. Thousands of explosive mines would have been installed on the seabed. This situation would make any kind of civilian or military passage completely impossible. Iran's plan was to turn the strait into a dark and extremely dangerous zone. The United States, however, illuminated that shadow and eliminated that deadly threat directly at its source. The sinking of the mine-laying ships struck at the heart of Iran's asymmetric naval warfare doctrine. By the end of the attacks, approximately 95% of the Iranian fleet had been reduced to a useless pile of scrap metal. Iran's operational capacity at sea had practically ceased to exist. However, the sinking of the Iranian Navy and its mine-laying ships did not solve all the problems. The United States still needed to secure the global flow of energy. To do this, they had to implement additional large-scale, multi-layered protection measures. After all, the global economy continued to lose millions of dollars every minute that passed. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, appeared before the cameras at this critical moment. He announced to the entire world the new rules of the game in extremely harsh terms. He declared that they were adopting a very firm stance regarding the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. He emphasized that, if necessary, they would use a level of force never before seen in the world. More importantly, CENTCOM signaled that it would assume a new mission. United States warships would personally escort civilian oil tankers transiting the region. This meant that the United States Navy was assuming the role of a sort of global maritime police force at the highest level. Carrier strike groups were quickly deployed to the region and took up strategic positions. Advanced air defense systems formed a veritable steel shield around the strait. This massive military reinforcement aimed to restore confidence in panicked markets. Therefore, the mission in the region is not yet complete for the United States. American forces will not stop until these invisible risks in the Strait of Hormuz are eliminated. They will continue their offensive operations against Iran until land-based threats are completely destroyed. The second phase of these relentless operations has a very clear objective: to hunt down and destroy these land-based systems. The Pentagon is monitoring the region with satellites in space and high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. The Iranian coast is being analyzed centimeter by centimeter and second by second. Advanced U.S. bombers are literally raining destruction from the sky. They relentlessly attack detected radar stations. Drone launch sites and underground bunkers are being wiped off the map in a matter of seconds. A large-scale operation is underway against all Iranian military assets capable of threatening the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, Washington's military strategy has now reached a much deeper and more ruthless dimension. It has been specifically designed to completely sever the enemy's operational survival line. The attacks are no longer focused solely on the weapons being used. They are also destroying the facilities that produce these weapons, command and control centers, and secret communication networks. The most recent statements by the United States Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, are the clearest evidence of this reality. The military equivalent of this determination is being expressed directly. Hegseth asserts that Iran's current military capabilities have suffered massive destruction. As a result, the Strait of Hormuz has become the scene of a relentless confrontation between two opposing sides. The confrontation pits two opposing strategies against each other. On one side, Iran attempts to pressure the global system using asymmetric weapons capable of threatening strategic maritime routes. On the other, the United States utilizes massive naval and air power to keep key trade routes open. This is not a traditional naval conflict. The Iranian threat relies on mobile and hidden systems, missiles concealed in caves, drones, and surprise attacks, which makes neutralizing them slow and complex. So far, the American offensive has succeeded in destroying a large part of Iranian naval assets, with forces led by the aircraft carriers USS Gerald Ford and USS Abraham Lincoln. Many Iranian ships have been destroyed, and the few survivors have been forced to flee to distant waters, thwarting plans to blockade the sea. Even so, the conflict continues. The threat has shifted from the sea to the mountains and tunnels, where missiles and drones can still be launched. The final outcome remains uncertain, and the future of security in the Strait of Hormuz will depend on how long Iran's asymmetrical capability can withstand U.S. military pressure.